Liam Thorne adjusted the collar of his worn denim jacket as he stepped through the grand archway of Crestwood Academy. This was his fourth new school in as many years, a consequence of his father's itinerant work as a structural engineer. At 18, Liam had perfected the art of blending in, a survival tactic honed through countless first days. He wasn't particularly tall or broad, with dark, observant eyes that seemed to absorb everything while giving little away. The morning bustle of Crestwood's main hall was a familiar symphony of lockers clanging and youthful chatter. Liam navigated the currents of students with practiced ease, his head down, backpack clutched tight. He'd already memorized the quickest routes between classes and identified the quiet alcoves where he could eat his lunch in peace, far from prying eyes. "Well, well, well, look what the cat dragged in," a voice drawled from behind him as he neared his locker. Liam didn't need to turn. He recognized the tone, a blend of entitlement and casual menace he'd encountered in every new town. Trouble, it seemed, had found him again. The voice belonged to Rex Kincaid, a burly senior with a perpetually sneering grin and the kind of unearned confidence that came from never being challenged. Rex was flanked by his usual enforcers, Silas Vance, a lanky kid with a predatory gleam in his eyes, and Brick O'Malley, shorter but built like a brick wall, whose knuckles looked permanently bruised. They were the self-appointed rulers of Crestwood's social order, mistaking intimidation for respect. "New kid thinks he's too cool to acknowledge his betters," Rex continued, stepping close enough for Liam to catch the stale scent of energy drinks. "That's not very polite, is it, boys?" Liam kept his gaze fixed on his locker combination, his fingers steady despite the knot tightening in his stomach. He'd played this game before. The trick was to deny them the reaction they craved: fear, anger, or most crucially, a reason to escalate. What they couldn't know, what no one at Crestwood could possibly fathom, was that Liam had spent the last 5 years immersed in the brutal world of unlicensed sparring circuits, moving from one back-alley dojo to another with his father's shifting contracts. He'd discovered a raw, unsettling talent for combat, a skill he both relied on and desperately wished to leave behind. "I'm talking to you, denim boy," Rex said, shoving Liam's shoulder hard against the metal locker. The thud echoed, causing a ripple of glances that quickly averted. No one wanted to cross Rex's crew. Liam straightened slowly, his hand still on the locker handle. "Apologies," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Just trying to get my books." Silas snickered, a high-pitched grating sound. "Hear that, guys? Just trying to get my books." "What are you, a librarian?" Brick stepped in, boxing Liam against the lockers. "We heard you're from the city," he rumbled, cracking his knuckles. "Big city boy, huh? Well, this is our town, and we set the rules. You catch my drift?" Liam nodded, keeping his eyes downcast. Inside, his heart rate was slowing, his breathing deepening, the automatic physical responses he'd trained for years to control before a confrontation. But he suppressed them. A fight here meant questions, school suspensions, maybe even legal trouble. More importantly, it meant his father discovering the underground circuit, a secret Liam had guarded for 2 years. "Good," Rex said, patting Liam's cheek in a condescending gesture. "So here's the deal. Every day you're gonna hand over whatever pocket money you've got. Call it a courtesy fee. And on Fridays you're gonna handle our assignments. Math, history, whatever. Got it?" Before Liam could respond, the warning bell shrieked and the hallway quickly emptied. Rex's crew backed off, but the message was clear. This was just the beginning. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of forced introductions and attempts to fade into the background. At lunch, Liam found a secluded table in the far corner of the cafeteria, pulling out a sandwich his mother had packed and a well-worn sketchbook. He'd learned that appearing occupied made him less approachable, though it rarely worked for long. "Well, well, well," Silas's voice cut through his concentration. "If it isn't our new little errand boy." Liam looked up to see all three of them approaching, trays in hand, identical smirks promising trouble. The cafeteria was packed, but students were already turning away, feigning disinterest. "Mind if we join you?" Rex asked, not waiting for an answer before sliding into the seat opposite Liam. Silas and Brick flanked him, their presence instantly making the small table feel claustrophobic. "Actually," Liam began, starting to rise. "Sit down," Brick snapped, his hand landing heavily on Liam's shoulder, forcing him back into his chair. "We're not finished talking." Rex reached across the table and picked up Liam's sandwich, examining it with exaggerated disdain. "Ham and cheese," he announced to his cronies. "How quaint. I was getting bored of the cafeteria slop anyway." He took a large bite, chewing slowly while maintaining eye contact with Liam. Crumbs fell onto the table, and Rex made no effort to clean them. It was a deliberate act of disrespect, a primal display of dominance. "You know what I think?" Silas drawled, leaning back. "I think our friend here needs to learn his place. This isn't the big city, kid. You don't just waltz into our school and expect to be treated like you belong." Liam felt his jaw tighten, but he forced himself to remain outwardly calm. In the sparring circuits, he'd learned to read opponents, to understand their tells and weaknesses. Rex was the archetypal alpha, constantly needing to assert his power. Silas was the provocateur, pushing situations toward confrontation. Brick was the blunt instrument, the muscle. They operated as a unit, feeding off each other's aggression. "Look," Liam said carefully, "I don't want any trouble. I just want to get through the year." "Trouble?" Rex scoffed, finishing Liam's sandwich and wiping his hands on Liam's napkin. "Who said anything about trouble? We're just being neighborly. Right, fellas?" He nodded to Brick, who immediately reached over and swept Liam's sketchbook off the table. It hit the floor with a soft thud, pages splaying open. "Oops," Brick said with mock sincerity. "Butterfingers." Liam started to retrieve his sketchbook, but Silas's foot shot out, blocking his path. "Where you going, denim boy? Lunch isn't over yet." The nickname grated on Liam more than he cared to admit. In the circuit, he'd earned a reputation, a name whispered with a mix of awe and trepidation. Here, he was just denim boy, a nobody to be pushed around. "Please," Liam said, his voice still quiet, but with a new, subtle edge. "Just let me get my sketchbook." Rex leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Say, please, sir," he demanded. "Show some proper respect." The cafeteria seemed to fall silent around them, other students sensing the escalating tension but unwilling to intervene. Liam could see a few teachers at the far end of the room, engrossed in conversation, oblivious to the drama unfolding. Liam closed his eyes for a brief moment, centering himself as old man Tiber had taught him. In the circuit, there were unwritten rules, a code of conduct even the most brutal fighters adhered to. This was different, systematic humiliation designed to chip away at his spirit. It was psychological warfare, the kind that could break someone without the tools to fight back. But Liam had those tools, he just couldn't use them. "Please, sir," he said finally, the words tasting like ash. "Let me get my sketchbook." Rex's grin widened. "That's better. See, boys? He's a quick learner." He nodded to Silas, who moved his foot. Liam quickly retrieved his sketchbook, checking the pages for damage as he returned to his seat. The cover was scuffed, but it was intact. "Same time tomorrow, denim boy," Rex said as the three stood up. "And don't forget our little arrangement. We'll be expecting that courtesy fee." They walked away, laughing, leaving Liam alone at the table, the remnants of his lunch scattered around him. He sat there for several minutes, staring at the crumbs Rex had left, feeling the weight of every averted gaze. The afternoon classes dragged by, Liam unable to focus on anything but the cafeteria encounter. He'd faced bullies before, but never with such a calculated long-term strategy. Rex's crew wasn't just looking for a quick thrill, they were establishing a permanent hierarchy. As the final bell rang, Liam gathered his books, hoping to slip out unnoticed. But as he turned the corner into the main hallway, he saw them waiting. Rex leaned against the lockers, arms crossed, while Silas and Brick guarded the exit. They had him boxed in. "Time to pay up, Denim boy," Rex called out as Liam approached. The hallway was emptying quickly, students rushing for buses or after-school activities, leaving fewer witnesses. Liam reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill, his lunch money for the next day. He held it out without making eye contact, hoping for a swift, quiet transaction. Rex snatched the money, examining it with theatrical disappointment. $5? That's it? Come on, city boy. I know you've got more. That's all I have, Liam said truthfully. His family wasn't wealthy, and he'd learned to make every dollar count. Check his bag, Silas suggested with a cruel smile. Maybe he's hiding a stash. Before Liam could protest, Brick grabbed his backpack and upended it. Books, notebooks, pens, and personal items scattered across the polished floor. Other students stepped around the mess, their eyes carefully averted. "Look what we have here," Rex said, picking up a small, laminated drawing that had fallen from one of Liam's textbooks. It was a crayon drawing of a stick figure family, clearly made by a child, with Liam's family scrawled beneath it. Oh, how cute. He carries pictures from kindergarten. Liam felt a cold dread settle in his stomach as Rex held the drawing up for Silas and Brick to see. It was a drawing his little sister, Lily, had made for him when he first left for Crestwood, telling him it would keep him safe. "My sisters," he said quietly, reaching out his hand. "Please give it back." "Please," Rex mocked, holding the drawing higher. "I think we need to teach our friends some manners about asking nicely." He made a show of examining the drawing more closely, then looked back at Liam with a calculating expression. "You know what? I think I'll hold on to this for a while. Maybe show it around, let everyone know what a softie we've got here." "Give it back," Liam said, his voice carrying a warning that made Silas and Brick exchange quick glances. For a fleeting moment, something had shifted in Liam's demeanor, a subtle change in posture, a different quality to his stillness. Rex either didn't notice or chose to ignore it. "Or what?" he challenged, waving the drawing tauntingly. "You gonna tell the principal? Call your mommy to come pick you up?" Liam took a step forward, and suddenly the air in the hallway felt charged. Brick's hand instinctively moved toward his waist, and Silas straightened from his casual lean. Something about Liam's movement had triggered their predator instincts, warning them that the prey might not be as helpless as they'd assumed. But Rex was too invested in the performance to back down. With a deliberate motion, he tore the drawing in half, then in half again, letting the pieces flutter to the floor around Liam's scattered belongings. "Oops," Rex said with exaggerated innocence. "Looks like an accident." Liam stared down at the torn pieces of the drawing, feeling something snap inside him. Lily had drawn it for him, a small piece of home he carried everywhere. When Liam looked up, Rex took an involuntary step backward. The quiet, submissive boy from the cafeteria was gone, replaced by someone with eyes like polished stone and the kind of stillness that preceded a storm. "You shouldn't have done that," Liam said softly. "Yeah?" Rex recovered his bravado quickly, stepping back into Liam's personal space. "What are you going to do about it, Denim boy? Cry?" Liam bent down and began picking up his scattered belongings, his movements careful and deliberate. He gathered the torn pieces of the drawing and tucked them into his pocket, then methodically repacked his backpack. The three bullies watched him with growing confusion, unsure why their victim wasn't reacting as expected. "That's right," Silas said, trying to regain the upper hand. "Clean up your mess like a good little boy." Liam stood slowly, shouldering his backpack. When he looked at Rex again, his expression was utterly neutral. "I'll see you after school," he said simply. "What's that supposed to mean?" Brick demanded, but Liam was already walking away, heading toward the exit with steady, measured steps. Rex called after him, "Hey, we're not done here." But Liam didn't turn or acknowledge the shout. He pushed through the doors and stepped out into the afternoon sunlight, leaving the three bullies standing in the hallway with a vague sense that their carefully controlled dynamic had just fractured. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly for Liam. He walked home to the small apartment his family was renting, ate a quiet dinner with his parents, and completed his homework with mechanical precision. His mother asked about his day, and he gave her the standard fine response. She didn't press, though he caught her studying his face with the worried expression parents developed when they sensed their children were struggling. That evening, Liam stood in front of his bedroom mirror and unwrapped the athletic tape from around his hands, a ritual he'd maintained even during his forced retirement from fighting. His knuckles were still scarred from his last bout 6 months ago, faint lines that told the story of a young man who'd learned to survive through violence. The circuit had found him by accident during his family's time in Detroit. Liam had been getting jumped by local toughs near their apartment when an older man named Old Man Tiber had intervened. Tiber, a former bare-knuckle boxer, now scouted for underground operations. He'd seen something in Liam's stubborn refusal to stay down and offered to teach him. What began as self-defense had evolved into something far more serious. Liam discovered a natural aptitude for timing, devastating power, and most importantly, the ability to remain utterly calm under duress. Within months, he was fighting in dimly lit basements and abandoned warehouses for cash prizes that helped his family make ends meet. Within a year, he was known as one of the most promising young fighters on the circuit. But the underground world came with its own dangers, shady characters, gambling debts, and the constant threat of police raids. When his family moved to Crestwood, Liam had decided to leave that life behind. He'd told himself he could survive high school by being invisible, by waiting for graduation. Rex Kincaid had made that strategy impossible. Liam re-wrapped his hands and spent an hour moving through his training routine, shadowboxing in the cramped space between his bed and desk. His body remembered the movements perfectly. The intricate footwork, the precise combinations, the way to generate maximum force from minimal space. Muscle memory was a powerful thing, and despite months of inactivity, Liam felt his reflexes sharpening with each repetition. The next morning at Crestwood Academy, Liam sensed the shift in atmosphere immediately. Word of the hallway confrontation had spread like wildfire, and students watched him with a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed to be waiting for a show, but all of them knew something was about to break. Rex's crew was more aggressive than usual, emboldened by their perceived victory. They deliberately blocked Liam's path in the hallways, forcing him to detour while they made loud, disparaging comments about his appearance, his family, and his general worthlessness. During lunch, they occupied his usual corner table, forcing him to eat standing near the garbage bins. "Looking a little jumpy there, denim boy," Silas commented as Liam passed their table on his way to dispose of his tray. "Sleep well last night? Maybe you were dreaming about torn pictures." Liam didn't respond, but several students at nearby tables had stopped eating to listen. The tension in the cafeteria was palpable, and even some teachers were beginning to notice. "I heard his mommy called the school," Brick added, loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear. "Wanted to complain about kids being mean to her precious little baby." This was a lie, but truth had never mattered to them. The fabrication would spread through the school's gossip network within hours, adding another layer of humiliation to Liam's growing reputation as a victim. "That's enough," a voice cut through the noise. Everyone turned to see Chloe Davies, a senior who served as student council president and commanded respect from both students and faculty. She was walking toward their table with a determined expression. "Stay out of this, Davies," Rex warned, but his voice lacked its usual swagger. Chloe had the kind of social standing that could make life very difficult for bullies if she chose to make an issue of their behavior. "No," Chloe said firmly, stopping directly beside Liam. "I won't stay out of it. What you're doing is pathetic, and everyone knows it." For a moment, Liam felt a surge of hope that someone was finally willing to stand up to Rex's crew, but he also knew that Chloe's intervention would only make things worse in the long run. Bullies didn't respond well to public humiliation. They would take their frustration out on him once there were no witnesses. "Thanks," Liam said quietly to Chloe, "but it's okay. I can handle it." Chloe looked at him with surprise and disappointment. "You don't have to handle it alone," she said. "There are people who will help if you just ask." But Liam was already walking away, leaving Chloe standing beside Rex's table with a frustrated expression. He knew she meant well, but she didn't understand the dynamics at play. Rex's crew wouldn't be deterred by social pressure or administrative intervention. They would only be stopped by someone willing to meet them on their own terms. The final confrontation came that afternoon as Liam was leaving school. He'd deliberately stayed late in the library, hoping Rex's crew would give up waiting. But as he pushed through the main doors of Crestwood Academy, he saw them positioned strategically around the parking lot. Rex leaned against a car near the exit, while Silas and Brick blocked the main walkway. Other students were leaving in groups, heading toward buses and cars, with the casual chatter of teenagers whose biggest worry was weekend plans. A few noticed the positioning of Rex's crew and quickened their pace, instinctively avoiding what looked like a developing situation. Liam adjusted his backpack straps and started walking toward the street, hoping to circle around the parking lot, but Rex pushed off from the car and called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hey, Denim Boy, we need a word." Liam kept walking, but he could hear footsteps behind him as all three bullies fell into step. The parking lot was emptying quickly as students sensed trouble and made themselves scarce. Within minutes, the area around the school entrance was deserted, except for Liam and his pursuers. "I said we need a word," Rex repeated, his voice carrying the edge that suggested the talking phase was almost over. Liam reached the sidewalk and turned to face them. The three bullies had spread out in a semicircle, cutting off his escape routes and positioning themselves for maximum intimidation. They looked confident, relaxed even, like predators who had cornered their prey. "What do you want?" Liam asked, though he already knew the answer. "What do I want?" Rex laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I want you to understand something, city boy. Yesterday you made me look like a fool in front of the whole school. You walked away when I was talking, and you made me seem weak." "I didn't disrespect anyone," Liam said calmly. "I just picked up my things and left." "See, that's where you're wrong," Silas interjected, cracking his knuckles in preparation. "When Rex is talking to you, you listen until he's done. That's how respect works around here." Brick stepped closer, close enough that Liam could smell the stale cigarette smoke on his clothes. "We tried to be nice," he said. "We tried to teach you the rules the easy way. But I guess you need a harder lesson." Liam felt the familiar calm settling over him, the same focused state he'd entered before every bout in the circuit. His breathing slowed, his vision sharpened, and his awareness expanded to take in every detail of his surroundings. Three opponents, spread out but not professionally. They were used to intimidating victims, not fighting trained combatants. Rex was the leader, but probably the weakest physically. Silas was tall but unbalanced, favoring his right side. Brick was the most dangerous, built like a brawler with calloused knuckles that suggested real street fighting experience. "Last chance, Denim Boy," Rex said, pulling off his jacket and tossing it aside. "Get on your knees. Apologize for disrespecting me, and maybe we'll just rough you up a little. Keep acting tough, and we'll put you in the infirmary." Liam slowly shrugged off his backpack, setting it down carefully on the sidewalk. The motion was deliberate, methodical, and something about it made Silas take a half step backward. "You sure you want to do this?" Liam asked, his voice carrying a new quality that none of them had heard before. It wasn't fear or pleading. It was the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. "What's that supposed to mean?" Brick demanded, but his eyes were studying Liam with new attention, picking up on subtle changes in posture and positioning. Liam straightened up from placing his backpack down, and when he looked at them again, the transformation was complete. The quiet, submissive boy they'd been terrorizing was gone, replaced by someone with the predatory stillness of a seasoned fighter. "It means," Liam said softly, "you picked the wrong target." Rex lunged first, throwing a wild, looping punch that announced itself from yards away. Liam slipped the strike effortlessly, stepping inside Rex's guard and driving a short, sharp uppercut into his solar plexus that buckled him. As Rex gasped for air, Liam grabbed the back of his head and drove a knee into his face, the impact making a sickening crunch that echoed across the empty parking lot. Rex dropped to the pavement, blood gushing from his nose, and didn't get back up. Silas and Brick rushed him simultaneously, but Liam had anticipated the uncoordinated assault. He sidestepped Silas's charge, grabbed his extended arm, and used his momentum to pivot, sending him face first into the side of a parked car. Silas hit the metal with a loud thud and slumped to the ground, groaning and clutching his head. Brick was more cautious, circling with his hands up in a rudimentary boxing stance that suggested some street brawling. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, looking at Rex's motionless form with shock and growing fear. Liam didn't answer. Instead, he moved forward with fluid precision, feinting high before driving a devastating body shot into Brick's ribs. The bigger boy doubled over, and Liam followed up with a left hook that snapped his head sideways and sent him spinning into the school's brick wall. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds. Liam stood in the middle of the sidewalk, barely breathing hard, looking down at three bullies who had just learned the brutal difference between intimidating victims and fighting someone who knew how to fight back. Rex was semi-conscious, mumbling incoherently through his broken nose. Silas was still pressed against the car, afraid to move in case he had a concussion. Brick had slid down the wall and was sitting on the ground, spitting blood and holding his ribs. "Listen carefully," Liam said, his voice carrying easily across the parking lot. "This ends now. You don't talk to me, you don't look at me, and you sure as hell don't touch me or my belongings ever again. If I hear about you bothering anyone else the way you bothered me, I'll find you and we'll have another conversation. Do you understand?" Brick nodded weakly, his eyes never leaving Liam's face. Silas managed a pained yes from his position against the car. Rex was still too dazed to respond coherently. Liam picked up his backpack and walked away, leaving the three bullies in various stages of consciousness and injury on the sidewalk behind him. As he reached the corner, he could hear Brick helping Rex to his feet and Silas groaning about needing to go to the emergency room. The next morning at Crestwood Academy, Liam walked through the main archway, wearing the same faded denim jacket, but everything else had changed. Students parted to let him pass, some with obvious respect, others with nervous glances that suggested word of the parking lot confrontation had spread quickly. Rex's crew was nowhere to be seen during first period, and by lunchtime, rumors were circulating that they'd all called in sick. Liam ate his sandwich at his usual corner table, but this time no one bothered him. In fact, several students made a point of nodding respectfully as they passed, including Chloe Davies, who stopped to tell him she was glad he'd finally stood up for himself. When Rex, Silas and Brick finally returned to school 3 days later, they were markedly different. Rex's nose was heavily bandaged, Silas had a spectacular black eye, and Brick moved carefully as if his ribs were still bothering him. They made no attempt to re-establish their previous dominance, instead giving Liam a wide berth and avoiding eye contact whenever their paths crossed. The transformation in Liam was just as dramatic, but in a different way. He still wore his denim jacket and kept mostly to himself, but he carried himself with a quiet confidence that commanded respect without demanding it. He'd learned that sometimes the only way to stop a bully was to meet them on their own terms, but he'd also made sure not to become what he'd fought against. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the parking lot incident, Liam was approached by a younger student who was clearly being picked on by some older kids. The boy was nervous, stammering as he asked if Liam might be willing to help him deal with some bullies who were making his life miserable. Liam listened to the story, recognized the familiar pattern of systematic intimidation, and agreed to have a conversation with the bullies in question. The conversation was brief and educational, and the younger student's problems disappeared immediately. Word spread quickly that Liam Thorne was someone who stood up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. He never sought out confrontations, never used his skills to intimidate or threaten, but everyone at Crestwood Academy understood that he was not someone to be messed with. By the time graduation arrived, Liam had earned something he'd never experienced at any of his previous schools: genuine respect from his peers and a reputation as someone who protected others rather than preyed on them. He'd learned that strength without compassion was just another form of bullying, but that sometimes the only language bullies understood was force. The quiet kid in the denim jacket had taught Crestwood Academy an important lesson about the danger of assumptions, and 3 former bullies had learned that picking on the wrong person could have consequences they never anticipated.